Hi, I'm That E-Guy, and welcome to another Game Heart review. Spellsword Cards DungeonTop is a deck builder / dungeon crawler / tactics roguelite game. It's a pretty difficult game to pin neatly into one genre, but that's because it has so many ideas, and all of them work together fantastically. DungeonTop is actually the third game in the Spellsword series from developers 1UP Plus Entertainment. DungeonTop released mid-January 2020 in early access, and as such I'm reviewing the game in an unfinished state and things are likely to change. The store page indicates that Spellsword is likely to be in early access for an estimated 3 to 6 months, but there is already a good amount of fun gameplay to be had in the current release. Currently in the game are 2 of the 3 planned heroes and 2 of the 4 planned allegiances. I'll talk about those later in more detail. All 3 dungeon floors are currently in the game, but if you do manage to finish them, the game does end abruptly and quite anticlimactically. With that FYI out of the way, let's talk about DungeonTop. DungeonTop is a deck-building dungeon crawler, but the combat happens on a tactical map where your hero and summoned units can reposition in order to get the upper hand in combat. The battle maps always use square grids, but do vary in size depending on the encounter. Sometimes they are small squares, other times they might be wide rectangles. It depends on the theme of the battle, and I've found that the encounters that are currently in the game all feel fun to play, and some of them offer unique and interesting challenges. At the moment there are 2 characters in the game, the warrior and the mage. These characters have their own starting decks and their own skill trees, and have quite different playstyles. The warrior is a more in-your-face hero and can bolster their deck with minions in order to overwhelm the opponent. The mage is designed to be used more with spells, but thanks to the looting system you can build them with a lot more powerful minions too if you so desire. In addition to the heroes that you select, when starting the game you can also choose an allegiance. These allegiances determine what cards you have access to in your deck and the rewards that you will be able to choose from after battle. In the current state of the game, each allegiance has 3 starting decks per hero, providing a lot of flexibility depending on how you want to play. When getting into a battle encounter, the player will draw a hand of cards. They are free to choose which cards to keep and which to redraw, and then the battle starts. Currently, the player always goes first, and as such you can plan your opening hand accordingly. As with other card games, you have a mana count, which determines what you can play. In DungeonTop, your mana also determines how many cards you can draw at the start of a turn. Not all cards cost mana, so it's important to keep a balance between powerful cards and free ones, because you never want your mana to run too low, lest you be crippled in the following turn. Most cards used in combat come in one of 2 categories, either spells or minions. Minions are played to the battlefield and have their own health and attack stats, whereas spells are played in lots of different ways. Spells can deal damage, summon units in special ways, buff allies, teleport units, or set negative statuses on the opponents. Throughout the dungeon you may also acquire potions, which show up in your deck too. Hoping for them to come up at the right time can be a little tricky due to them being shuffled into the deck. If a battle is lost or if your hero is otherwise reduced to 0 HP, the game ends and you are returned to the title screen so that you can try again. In this sense, there is no progression from run to run, as you will always be starting from the same place, but there are some unlocks to attain. Throughout your adventure in the dungeon, you will earn treasures. These treasures are actually cards that can be added to your deck and often have powerful effects. If you escape the dungeon, the treasures will be converted to gold, which can be spent on cards to find in future runs, but if you lose, you only keep 25% of the total treasure that you find. As such, players are encouraged to keep as much treasure as possible till the end of the run. You will often run into shops and other services that cost a single treasure each time you make a purchase. As a result, you will need to weigh up whether upgrading a card or purchasing a potion is worth losing the treasure's power and value. Sometimes you won't have a choice and you'll need to make that sacrifice in order to get what you need to continue the run safely. When you defeat an enemy in combat, your chosen character will gain experience and loot. The loot can be more cards for your deck, potions, treasures, and even weapons, which change how your character attacks and how much damage they do. As the loot as well as the dungeon layouts are randomized each time you start a run, there is some difference between each run, But overall, in the current state of the game, there aren't many cards or enemies in the game, so you'll usually come across most of the same stuff from run to run if you go long enough. So it is pretty easy to aim for a specific build if that suits you. If you gain enough experience, you'll be able to level up, choosing one skill from 3 distinct paths. These skills can afford you extra mana or new abilities, and even change the way you attack. These abilities are always the same, and can really help turn the tide of battle depending on what you're struggling with in a particular run. In order to progress through DungeonTop, you'll traverse a dungeon map, making your way through enemy encounters and heading toward the dungeon floor's boss. Defeating the boss of the floor progresses you to the next floor, and you repeat the process again. As mentioned at the start of the video, there are currently only 3 floors, and once clearing that, you've finished the run and get to cash in your treasures. The developers don't have anything set in stone regarding what the end of the game will be like when it's released in full, but they have hinted that there may be a 4th, final boss to contend with. Overall, DungeonTop is a great game with a nice visual style, and it shows a lot of promise. Even in its current state, it has enough variety and content to easily get 15 hours out of, and very likely more if you're aiming to get all of the achievements or to beat the game with every hero and allegiance combination. In its early access state, DungeonTop is changing quite rapidly, and even while playing over the last week or so, there have been several balance and bug fixing updates, which shows to me that the devs care about the game. But if the rapidly changing game environment puts you off, you may want to wishlist or follow the game on Steam or Discord so you can keep up with the development to see when it settles down. The developer roadmap indicates that there are even more features to come, with difficulty selections, run modifiers, and even a drafting mode that allows you to start with a completely different deck every time you begin a run. In closing, DungeonTop takes bold steps with the deck-building dungeon crawler genre, and I'm keen to see where those steps lead. I hope you've enjoyed this review. Please like or share the video if you feel so inclined, or leave a comment and I'll get back to you.